Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 975A, and today's date is May 19th, 2016, and the title of the episode is IMF Makes a Push to Take Control of Iran's Banking System. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, today we saw gold slam back down once again. And what's very interesting about this, a couple days before, we had 18,000 contracts put into the market, sold off, and it brought gold down. Yesterday we had the FOMC minutes. Gold was brought down with that. Then we had today lacquer telling everyone that, everything is fine, don't worry about it. And gold has dropped even further. But what's very interesting is that people, central banks, countries, they're gobbling it up. To me, it looks like everything just went on sale. Silver went on sale. Gold went on sale. And at this point, everyone should be thinking to themselves, if they're that desperate to push gold down like they've been doing, once they lose control, what is going to happen? It's going to move up. I mean, if you look at the USDebtClock.org, down at the bottom right-hand corner, they're using the calculation that they used back in 1913 with the M2 money supply. And we see that gold right now, they're estimating around $7,000 per ounce. Silver, they're estimating around $779 per ounce, which is the true ratio between gold and silver. And think about how much you can purchase silver for right now. So when we look at this, we can say to ourselves, maybe I should pick up some to ensure my wealth, just in case something happens. And we know that something will happen because we can see the manipulation. We can see what the U.S. government central bankers have been doing. Now, the initial jobless claims, they came out, and I see all over the corporate media, they're saying, oh, look, the trend is back going down. Everything is fine. Less people are applying, nothing to worry about. Actually, the trend is not going down. It is moving up at this point. And again, the initial jobless claims, they don't make any sense because, according to Challenger Gray and Christmas, layoffs are continually trending upward. But initial jobless claims, according to the U.S. government and the corporate media, they're headed downward. Something doesn't make sense. Someone is lying. Now, we've been talking about retail, and we've been seeing a lot of stores come in with sales declining. Now, Walmart came in, and it's all over the corporate media. They're making a really big deal about this, how Walmart surged 9%. They beat expectations. Everything looks amazing. Guess what? Retail isn't as bad as we thought it was. It looks like everything's improving at this point. Well, then you got to look closely at what they did to do this. And what's very funny about this, other corporations have done this in the past to make their revenues look better, make their sales look better, where they closed factories, laid off employees, bought back their stock. And this is exactly what Walmart did. They spent $4.3 billion in buybacks and dividends in the quarter, and they created $4 billion in free cash flow. And what's even more interesting than that, do you really think that people all of a sudden ran out to Walmart and started purchasing like crazy? No, of course not. Now, we did come off of tax season. Maybe some people got revenues. Maybe we can give them that. But when we look closely at this, we see that food stamp dollars were used in Walmart in the amount of $13 to $18 billion. So as the people are getting laid off, they're applying for food stamps, they're going into Walmart and purchasing food. And from the buybacks, by laying off, by closing stores, with food stamp money, they were able to show that, look, everything is fine. So is really everything fine? No, because you know what's going to happen next month and the month after that. All of a sudden, unexpectedly, like they like to use, sales are going to decline. Now, of course, they can't blame it on the weather because it's spring, it's beautiful, and it's warm, so they're not going to be able to do this. And they'll try to explain it away some other way. But right now, they're trying to convince everyone that retail sales, they're on the mend. Everything is fine. Now, Caterpillar, they came out, well, their sales are not doing well at all. I mean, if we think back to the Great Recession, they had 19 months of declining sales. 19 months from 2008 all the way up to the beginning of, or the middle of 2010. Right now, during this incredible recovery that the president continually tells us that we're in, that the Fed continually tells us that the economy is strong, Caterpillar has had 41 months of declining sales. It is worse off, it's more than double what it was during the recession period. So let's break down where it's going wrong, because people say, well, it must be Latin America. That's where the problem is. Well, no, that's not where the problem is. It's one of the problems, but it's not the entire problem. When we look at this, we see that North America sales are down 11%. When we look at Asia Pacific, we see sales are down 10%. Yes, Latin America, that is the worst. It is 37%. We see Europe, Africa, Middle East, down 6%. So when we look at this, it's not just one area. It's a combination of all the areas, and there's no sign of improvement whatsoever. Another sign, another indicator, someone is lying once again. Because if this is a recovery, I hate to see what the entire collapse is going to look like. And it's going to look horrific. We see the Philly Fed. Remember we had that bounce in March? Well, that's gone too. Now we see that the Philly Fed, it dropped to negative 1.6 and negative 1.8 in new orders. So they tumbled right back to contraction. So we have this strange blip out of nowhere last month, but out of the 8 of the 9, we've had contraction, signaling recession. Recession, recession, recession. And looking at Caterpillar, looking at the Philly Fed, looking at retail, this is a lot worse than a recession. We are going through the collapse. Now, of course, no one's going to admit to it, especially the president and the government, not the Fed, because they've been telling us that everything is fine. Can you imagine if they came out and all of a sudden said, hey, oh, we're in a recession right now? You mean you lied to us all these years? No, they have to keep the illusion alive. They just can't admit to that. And we're seeing more and more investors flee the stock market. I mean, Bank of America is telling us that we're in 16 weeks or so of smart money leaving the market. Carl Icahn is saying that he's getting out of the market. I even heard George Soros is dumping stocks and buying gold because they realize the market is at its top. They realize the market is now coming down. Yes, I know people will make money on the downward crash of the market. People make money on the upward trend of the market. But for the rest of the people, when the market declines, we're going to see a lot of businesses, a lot of investments just completely disappear. Look what happened back in 2008. Pensions, gone. Jobs, gone. Businesses, shut down. People losing their houses. It's going to be the same, but a factor of 100 times worse. Because we've already gone through 2008. Many people, millions of people, have never recovered. All that toxic real estate, all the toxic mortgages, the Fed still has it. Banks are keeping foreclosures off the market. This whole thing was one gigantic bubble. to convince the American people that everything is fine. Now, we know what the central bankers are planning. They're planning to go into each one of the countries and push debt out further and further, because this is how their system operates. They need to push debt. If they don't push debt, their system comes to an end. And this is why they're going into many different countries and having regime change, because they need to set up a central bank in there. They need to have full control, and they need to capture the oil market, put the dollar on the oil, and keep the system operating. And this was the deal with Iran. Because what we're hearing right now from the IMF, they're warning Iran not to count on oil for their revenue to boost their economy. They should seek other opportunities, but don't depend on oil and don't sell oil right now. Very interesting, because remember what Iran did. They said they're going to sell oil not using the dollar. The IMF, which is controlled by the United States, is one and the same. They're telling them, listen, don't do this. Now, the IMF, they're looking to get into their banking system. They're saying that Iran must tackle problems in its banking system, bolster anti-money laundering, terrorism financing, and they need to come in line with the IMF so they can reconnect them to the global economy. This was the whole entire deal. The entire deal was not nuclear. The entire deal was to get into the banking system, take control of it, take control of their oil industry, place the sale using the dollar, not the euro, not the ruble, not yuan. But this isn't happening right now. Iran is not looking at the U.S. Iran is looking at China and Russia. They already stated they're not going to go with the dollar. And this is a major, major problem. Why is it a major problem? Because if the U.S. cannot capture these countries and keep the petrodollar alive, the system collapses on its own. And the central bankers don't want this to happen. They want to bring the system down on their own. They need it to come down in an orderly fashion so they have the right people to blame. They don't want to blame themselves because they want to restart the system later on. Think about what happened in the past when the system crashed back in World War I, World War II. Right before that, the system crashed, and they restarted the system every single time. After World War II, they started Bretton Woods. Then in the 70s, what happened is that they took the dollar off of gold. They started the petrodollar system. Of course, if you remember back in that time, they told us the world was running out of oil, and this is why there were long lines at the gas stations. But really what they were doing is they were making the switch, and they started a new system called the petrodollar, which it wasn't backed up by gold anymore, and the central bank now had full power to print as much as they want, and the government was able to borrow as much as they wanted. And the next phase here, whenever the system comes to an end, they need to restart the system once again. But this time they let the system grow so large, so big, with a huge amount of debt, that all of this cannot continually go on. I mean, think about your own household here. You have a certain revenue coming in, and you keep on taking on more and more debt. Yes, in the beginning it's okay, the middle is okay, but there comes a period of time where you say, okay, I can keep borrowing, but how am I going to pay for the interest? How am I going to continue on with this? And guess what happens? You can't. So what happens? You default. This is what happens to every single government throughout history. This is a fact. And it's going to happen once again. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.